Good evening, guys. How are you all doing? Welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I'm inside today. So as much as it was a glorious day out there, blue skies and sunshine, there's a bit of a biting wind, which meant that vlogging outside just wasn't going to happen. So I'm afraid we'll have to start it inside. I've also got this light beaming onto me because I was trying to allow the phone footage to be a little bit better, but my goodness, I just feel like it's highlighting everything on my face, which is not very flattering. It's also quite a warm lamp, so I'm also feeling quite a lot of heat coming off of it. Anyway, hopefully you won't have to see this for much longer. So most of my history vlogs now follow a very similar pattern. It's normally about the Victorians, it's normally based in London, and it's about the beautiful horses back then and the different roles they played and how they were looked after and that kind of thing. And obviously I've read quite a few books now, and I've never come across anything that spoke about donkeys until a couple of days ago, when there was a whole section in a book about the donkey mart. Now, when I think of Victorians and donkeys, I sort of just thought about beach donkeys and nothing else. But it turns out that throughout the Victorian period in London, there was around 100,000 donkeys working on the streets, which completely blew my mind. I was like, I never realised there were so many donkeys working alongside the beautiful horses. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what these donkeys did. Donkeys were rather useful to the Victorians, especially those living on the poorer side of society in London, because they were strong, they were resilient, they were tough. They could manage to pull a heavy load on a cart or a barrow. They lived longer than horses did. They ate less than horses did. They coped with the weather better than horses did. If it was super hot, because of where donkeys originated from, they coped better. They didn't need to drink as much as horses would. They also coped when it was super cold. They tended to need the vet a lot less, just because they were tougher and more resilient. They just seemed to manage better. They lived longer than horses did. And though they weren't as fast as horses and wouldn't do the speeds that horses would do, they had incredible stamina. So they could work for hours and hours and hours throughout the day, throughout the week, and they'd manage just fine. They dealt very well with the cobbled streets as well. Donkeys are really heroic little animals, and they still are to this day. They, like I say, could put up with a lot.
Donkeys often came from Ireland back then, and they'd be brought over in large herds. They put onto the boats, and then when they arrived in the UK, they would literally be walked to London. And in London, there were quite a few donkey dealers who would just put a few donkeys in the market every Friday so not to flood it. That way they got maximum money. On a Friday afternoon at Islington Cattle Market, donkeys would be sold. Around 3,000 donkeys a year would change hands. This equates to around 57 donkeys every Friday. There used to be a saying that a good donkey is a better servant than a bad horse. In London, donkeys were most often used by the costermongers, who would attach a cart or a barrow behind their donkey. Costermonger is a person who sells goods like fruit, veg and flowers, etc. They would purchase their products from a large market early in the morning to get the freshest produce for the best price, then sell the produce. Often this took place at Covent Garden. In the 1860s, there was as many as 2,000 donkey barrows on the Saturday morning at Covent Garden Market. Many costermongers loved their donkeys dearly, especially as they spent so much time with them, and they wouldn't be able to do their job without them. They would look at them as a pet, often feeding them food from their own plate. If they didn't have a stable, they sometimes kept their donkey in the shed or even a lean-to against the backyard wall. Being a costermonger was a pretty hard job, long days in all weathers. If donkeys were hired, they were often treated far more poorly and were worked into the ground. Donkeys were also used for cabs, so you'd have a little cab that would go on the back of the donkey, and it literally would be suitable for just one person to sit in. Queen Victoria had her own donkey at her Isle of Wight residence, which she drove herself. London stables for cab horses often had a donkey around on the premises. There was a superstition that donkeys prevented the horses from getting glanders, which is a short-term or long-term and usually fatal disease. I always think of the Victorians and I think of beach donkeys, and actually beach donkey rides started in the late 1880s in the UK and became very popular. Sadly, beach donkeys were very poorly looked after and didn't get the best of lives. These plucky little animals were such hard workers, and though not as fast as a horse, they were incredibly reliable, super tough, and totally heroic. If you happen to be in London, head over to Covent Garden, because on Southampton Street there is a plaque that says, "This plaque is in memory of the 100,000 costermonger donkeys that worked in and around the market." And it's a lovely little commemorative plaque of all those amazing donkeys that worked tirelessly for their costermongers.
I hope you enjoyed my very brief look at donkeys in the Victorian era in London. What amazing little animals they are, incredibly resilient, so strong. I mean, they just kept working and kept working and kept working, and they helped put food on the plates of the costermongers who had very little. And they also must have brought the costermonger a lot of support. You know, at times when life is tough, you know, the weather's bad and whatever, I just feel like there's something about a donkey that just, you know, I don't know the words to use, but would just be some comfort to their owner, I imagine. I actually had a donkey as a teenager, so when I was growing up, I was fortunate enough to have a horse and a pony, but the horse used to go bonkers every time the pony left. So we went to Bristol Horse Home and picked up an ex-beach donkey. So she'd been a Western-super-Mare beach donkey, and then she'd actually gone to a racing stables and been a nanny there, and then she came to us and lived out the rest of her days with us. She was like, by the end of it, I think she was like 38, 39. She was a good age. Bless her. She was called Sausage. I mean, goodness knows who thought to call her Sausage. And at one point, I had a sausage, who was the donkey. I had a pie and a basil. So I had a sausage basil pie all at home, which I thought was rather amusing. But yeah, she was amazing. So tough, so hardy. Kind of, you know, ruled the roost, did whatever she fancied, went through any fence she fancied going through. Incredibly strong. Like when she wanted to be, she was only like 11'2", I'd say, but when she wanted to be, you'd have no hope of stopping her. She just bulldozed her way through any fence. But the horses adored her, and she sort of just knew her purpose. She knew to be around them, to kind of give them comfort, and just, they never show any emotion either, I find, with Donkey. She never showed any emotion on her face. Real tough little old thing. But yeah, absolutely gorgeous. I will admit that I did sit on her a few times as well. I used to ride her in the field. When I was younger and lighter, I used to sit on her bare back in the field, and she'd doodle along. Occasionally she'd have a cheeky moment as well, and have a little buck and everything. She was adorable. I'll put some pictures on the screen of her. But yeah, so if I won the lottery, I would definitely get some donkeys, because I'd love to have some around again. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and see you again soon for another vlog.